We're 2 months into the season. What overall trends can we examine, both from a league-wide standpoint and from a fantasy standpoint? Did we draft starting pitchers too soon? Fred Zinkie weighs in on this and a whole lot more coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the good folks from So Rare and from Prize Picks. As always on Tuesday, Jeff Erickson here with Fred Zinkie. Fred, welcome. Busy day of baseball, and we're in it now. We're 2 months in, basically, a third of the way through the season. Enough that I think we can look at some overall arching trends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody says, and there's some truth to this, that, scoring will pick up a little bit as the summer comes, the warm weather, things like that. But truthfully, like, it's already warm. Like, we didn't have a terrible spring. It's already warm in most of the country. It's been warm a bit in most of the country for a while. So sure, we'll pick it. That'll all pick up. Pitcher injuries could also degrade some teams' rotations and bullpens to the point where that also increases scoring. But I think we've gone deep enough into the season now where we can see some ways that this year is different than last year.
Yeah, I think so. So let's jump right into it here because I think there's some interesting overall trends. One of the things you talked about, and this is out of the start of the play before yesterday's games, 4 of the top 20 pitchers in ERA were drafted in the top 100. 4. That's stark.
It's really unbelievable. And that's kind of where I started on this path of trying to figure out like that we're going to keep going into. And like you said, I did it at the start of yesterday's games. There could be a couple more that snuck in yesterday or bumped out or whatever. The bottom line is if today it might be 3, it might be 5 or 6. It's going to bounce up and down 4. It's not going to 12, anytime soon. So yeah, when you look at the ERA leaders, Ranger Suarez, Seth Lugo, Reynaldo Lopez, Tanner Houck, all of those players were on the board in the second half of a 15-team league draft. Then you have Tarek Skubal, but then you have Luis Gil. Then you have Zach Wheeler. But then you have Javier Assad. Then you have Corbin Burns. But then you have Tyler Anderson and Reese Olson and Brady Singer and Jordan Hicks and Marcus Stroman. Again, all available in the second half of drafts. And now I'm up to 15. So it's amazing how the path to ERA greatness in your fantasy league right now so far was not paved in the first 10 rounds of your draft. Even when I said the top 100 picks, the first 6 or 7 rounds.
Fun fact from Martin Sikulski, who points out all these are converted relievers in many cases. Jordan Hicks, Ranger Suarez. I mean, there's a lot of them in there. And that was a trend that, guess what? I expressed a lot of skepticism about Jordan Hicks, not about Suarez. I just didn't talk about him at all. I was like, I was like Don Draper. I don't think of you at all. But look how well that's treating me. But Jordan Hicks, on the other hand, I was skeptical about. I didn't think it was going to work out necessarily. So far wrong about that. I only have one league where I have Hicks, and it was only because it's a keeper league and I got him super cheap, where I thought, okay, in case it does work, I'll do that there. But it's really kind of funny how that's worked out.
Absolutely. And then there are pitchers, as you mentioned, there are pitchers on the list that are converted relievers. There's also pitchers on the list who were starters, in the minors and came up as starters, but then became relievers. And then because they couldn't quite cut it. And then now they're back to being starters. Reynaldo Lopez, for example, was a starter, but then was a reliever at times in the majors.
Same thing with Lugo, though. I mean, yeah, same thing.
Exactly.
And Houck is the least reliever-ish of the group. He's been mostly a starter most of his career, so he doesn't quite get to fly that reliever flag like the other guys. But still.
But in 2022, he was basically a reliever all season. So, but then they went back to the rotation with him. So with no success, like 5.01 ERA last year. So then going into this year, you're like, hey, maybe this guy can't cut it as a starter.
Yeah, really remarkable though how many of those are of that class.
Yeah, it's true. So
I think the follow-up question is there a reason why they're being more successful?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Or is it maybe, I guess the lesson for us is don't give up on these pitchers if they don't have initial success as a starter. So their teams, in order to get use out of them, convert them to the bullpen. Because sometimes some of these pitchers get converted to the bullpen because because they don't think their team doesn't think they can cut it as a starter. But sometimes it's also just because they're blocked as a starter and they're at an age where they want to start using them. Ranger Suarez, at the start of his career, was on some pretty decent teams and with the Phillies and was used in the bullpen. They had starters. I know every team always needs starters, but not totally. Like sometimes teams will say, you know what, we want to get using this player, or maybe he doesn't have a lot of length because he's had injuries, so we're going to put him in the bullpen for a while to get use out of him this season because we don't think we can get much out of him in the rotation. But yeah, I think there definitely is a lesson there that we need to be maybe more optimistic on pitchers who are returning to being starters.
Yeah. I think that is absolutely right. And I think there are teams that are showing that willingness too. I mean, the Padres did it with Lugo and then they traded for Michael King this year under the same sort of guys. Now King has had his highs and lows, to be fair, but same thing is they're trying to find these starters a little bit maybe on the cheap and maybe with a little less accumulation of innings. And maybe that's the kind of reminder that some of these guys that the full-time starters have accumulated all these innings and thus they're getting hurt more, which is why they aren't present among the league leaders. It's survivor's bias, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And the bar for being an effective starter is, as high as it's ever been. Like for this year, for example, because scoring is being down. So it's not like these guys are the best of a bad lot or just guys who have fluky, success stories. Like last year, I think it was like 5 guys had a sub-3 ERA. And so far this year, I know this won't last, but so far this year, there's almost 20 with an ERA below 3. So these players who are at the very top of your ERA leaders, they're the best of a really good lot. Like there's a lot of competition right now to be among the ERA leaders. So it's not like Seth Lugo. It's just that you're like, everybody's getting scored on this year. He's got an ERA of 3. He just happens to be a little lucky. Like, no, that's not it. Like his ERA is in the ones. Like it's hard to hold an ERA in the ones 12 starts into the season.
Yeah, it is. It is. But what if you think that ERA is a little fluky? It doesn't measure everything properly. Maybe you should look at strikeouts. Well, guess what? Strikeouts, there's a lot of, non-early guys too in the top. And what did you find there with strikeouts?
Yeah, so strikeouts, if there's one area that would say to you, I should draft some early pitching, it's strikeouts. It's not totally like 12. There were heading into the week, there were 19 pitchers with 75 strikeouts. Picked I like round numbers.
Yes.
12 of the 19 were top 100 picks. So that is the best correlation of any of the pitcher stats. I kept the saves out of it because the saves are they're kind of different. Like most of the closers were picked in the top 100 picks out of the main. I use main event. So most of the closers picked the top 100 picks. So obviously a lot of the save leaders are going to come from that group. They don't all, but most of them do. So with saves, it's more like, are you using a top 50 pick in the main event or a top 100 pick? But anyways, strikeouts is the one where there's a good correlation, 12 of 19. So the one way that you could say that it is worth getting some elite starters is you can get a lot of strikeouts. That being said, that means you have to draft elite starters who have a high strikeout rate. So, because as we saw already so far, you're not getting in the ERA leaders necessarily with your early round starter so far, but you are getting among the strikeout leaders. So if you did draft, so say 19 starters, let's say you went with 2 aces, fairly early, then unless you got two of the top 20 pitchers or something, there's a good chance that you have 1 or 2 of the ERA leaders. So that's strikeout leaders. So that's the one category where it makes sense. But Jeff, I'll throw it back over to you to go to another pitcher category, which will go back into the maybe we shouldn't have drafted pitchers theory.
You're throwing it back to me. So I think you're suggesting that we talk whip then.
We talk whip.
All right. So the whip leaders, as you suggested, I mean, only 6 of the top 15 were drafted in the top 100. Now, you did 20 for ERA. Why did you do 15 here?
That's a great question. Maybe it suited my argument. I don't know. I think there might have been some guys in between 15 and 20. I think the reason I did 20 on ERA is because it went to the round number of
Gotcha.
a 3 ERA.
Okay.
You'll see some of the other stats that we're going to throw out. Like it just goes to round numbers, like 75 strikeouts, or I forget some of the other ones. That I have one for wins. Like it's like over 6 wins or something like that, because then there was like a cluster. So anyways, yeah, it might have suited my argument a little better. But either way, if you're looking at the league leaders in whip, other than Tarek Skubal, Tyler Glasnow, a lot of these other ones are Ranger Suarez, Garrett Crochet, Luis Heel, Bailey Falter Tanner Houck. Like some of these pitchers weren't even drafted, let alone when they were drafted. Garrett Crochet was a popular waiver wire guy in the first run. Bailey Falter was on my league. I commented on this later in our notes, but he was in 2 of my leagues. He was on the waiver wire this Sunday.
Yes, that's right.
He's 7th in the majors in WHIP, and I know he's been quote like fluky. He has been. He's still 7th in the majors in WHIP if you've had him in your lineup so far this year.
You want to know why he's available? Because in his 2-start week, where everybody picked him up, had 2 sweet matchups, he faltered. And so everybody remembered that and, didn't bother, like, whatever. It's noise. And still might be noise. I don't know.
It might be his FIPS 460. Like there's a lot of reasons to think, but I mean, yeah, anyways, going into this week, here's someone who in his last 3 starts has given up 3 runs total. Before a quality start, or even before that, and anyways, he's sitting on waivers in 2 of my main leagues. You would never in another season see a guy this late in the season with a whip under 1 just sitting on waivers. I know the strikeout rate's poor. He still gets as many strikeouts in a week as a reliever is going to get you.
Yep, that's right.
And he's getting you a better whip, or as good of a whip as you're going to get from the reliever. And he probably has more win potential.
Yeah.
And he's throwing more innings to influence your whip.
Yep, so, that's right.
Again, I know why he's on waivers. A lot of people don't think this can last. 196 BABIP. It probably won't last. But I'm just saying, other seasons, any port in a storm, Bailey Falter would have been picked up long time ago and held. You'd be like, look, I got to keep rolling this guy out there. His whip's under 1.
I got to ask, though, I wonder how often this is true in other years. I know we say that it isn't, but do we know this for a fact? Do we back test and see how many ERA and whip leaders were available on the waiver wire 2 months into the season? Is it that we are bad at identifying who's good, or is it just this is a fluky year, or is this part of a growing trend?
Right. So my question is, with scoring down across baseball, is it part of a growing trend where there are just more effective pitchers, and then because there's more effective pitchers, maybe it's harder for it's harder for some of your aces to get they'll get in the strikeout leaders because that's from skills volume, but it's harder for them necessarily to get in the ERA and whip leaders when you have guys like Bailey Falter and Ranger Suarez, having such excellent ratios. I don't know. This is something we're thinking about. I can remember way back to when I started playing NFBC, 2006, 7, things like that, years like that. I remember not being so, I don't know how to describe, dramatic about picking up starting pitchers off waivers. They were just there. You could get starters. You could get Bailey Falter types. You could get Kyle Gibson types off waivers, and they would be decent. But then as scoring went up at times, and then teams started doing things with the rotation, the starters weren't throwing as much. Then I felt like it was oh my gosh, if I can get a starter off waivers, how about this? I can throw out this concept to us. Were we foolish to pay $300 for Christian Scott in a season in which you can get Bailey Falter for $1? Or a bunch of these other pitchers, like I mentioned in our notes, Jake Irvin was on waivers.
I picked up Jake Irvin in the main event, although I'm not using him this week. It's as it turns out, because he's got 1 start against at home against Atlanta. Meanwhile, Tyler Anderson had 2 starts. Matt Waldron had 2 starts. Who else? Nate Eovaldi had 2 starts. I just decided to go volume there, but I get it at the same time.
Yeah, Kyle Gibson is on waivers and was on waivers in a lot of my leagues. 3.69 ERA, 1.23 WHIP. Those aren't great numbers, but they're not bad. They're not hurting you that much. He's got his 4 wins in 12 starts. He's kind of on pace for 10 wins. He's not quite a strikeout per inning. That's something we'll talk about later. But when you can get these guys for $1, were we foolish to chase $300? I know why people wanted Christian Scott in case he was Paul Skeens, but do we not need to spend so much on starting pitching this year because so many pitchers are doing a respectable job?
Yeah.
It's all supply and demand, right? And a few years ago, there was no supply. So I felt like I really chased, it was triple digit bids on starters, but I didn't do that 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I would not make triple digit bids on starters. I never did on starting pitchers because I was you can get a starter.
Well, just remember, I think this is kind of cyclical because remember last year and the year before, streaming was fraught with peril.
Yes.
That it was really hard to find pitchers on the waiver wire. This year, maybe not as much, But also that means the bar to what's effective has also changed a little bit. So, but Tyler Anderson, readily available, pitched well again last night. So I had Tyler Anderson going up against Matt Waldron. We drafted Matt Waldron, used him a few times, had a bad schedule and had one bad start. So we cut him and then we picked him back up. And he's been active the last 2 weeks before this week. Anderson and Waldron were effective last night. Neither had a tremendous amount of Ks. Neither got a win, unfortunately. And therein lies another rub. But yeah, it's good luck trying to chase wins right now. It's harder. And one of the reasons why it's harder is because pitchers don't go as deep into games. Waldron got an out into the 7th and we're like, ooh, nice. Except for the fact it was still 1-1 at the time because Anderson was too good. I mean, it was like almost a perfect result. I needed it to be 1-0. That's what I really needed. But I'm just greedy that way. But it was funny. Evaldi, Anderson, and Waldron all gave up 1 run apiece and none of them got a win. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. Because like you said, because the other guy was pitching well as well. I mean, Kyle Gibson, he was another guy, like I just mentioned, you could stream him this week for 2 starts. Yesterday, he wasn't great, 5 2/3, 3 runs. That's not great, but it's not a killer. 8 base runners and 5 2/3. Again, not a killer. 8 strikeouts. Didn't get the win, but 8 strikeouts. So, and we'll see. And that was his hard start. That was at Houston. His second start's home to Colorado. And you could get him for very little this week. And again, like I'm not saying like there's not all like it doesn't always work, but there's a lot of weeks. I write a 2-star pitcher article for Yahoo every Sunday night. Like there's this was a bad week for streamers. I wrote in the article this was the worst streamer week of the season, where the guys who were 2 starts this week were either aces and you can't get those, or were terrible. But sure enough, like you could have grabbed Tyler Anderson and Kyle Gibson and Matt Waldron in some leagues and started all of them. Trevor Williams, you could get still in shallow leagues, and he's a 2-star pitcher. We'll see how he does. But
he's not going to do anything. He went on the IL today. So
no way, I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, sorry.
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, so the Nats are bringing in an unknown guy to start today. So bad luck for you because they've already played too. So you can't really replace him unless you're in a day-to-day league. DJ Hertz is getting the call up and start tonight against the Mets. So bad break there. I wasn't a believer in Trevor Williams, but obviously don't want this to go on to happen to him.
Oh, that's an absolute killer. Just like if you have Williams, 2-start week here. Well, I actually don't know how it would have gone, but he had been pitching really well 2-start week. And then, like you said, he gets locked in. You don't get either start. That is a killer. You don't get that. Usually you get the first start. If you get an injury during a 2-start week, then the injury happens in the first start. But you didn't get either start and rosters had locked. Because again, also if it's a 2-start week, they're often the first start's Monday. So if they go on the IL before the game, you can get them out.
Yep.
That is a real killer. My labor team this year is like the everything that can go wrong does, and of course that's the one team I have him on.
Yeah. So I think you and Zach, the only 2 teams that had the tiebreaker on me, used the tiebreaker on me in pickups this week. Okay. I picked up 5 guys in labor, so I'm right there with you. By the way.
And I don't know, everything that can go wrong. It's like what happened to Trevor Williams is indicative of what happens to my team. Like every week, something like that happens. Someone goes down on a Monday, something like that.
Yep. Yeah. It is brutal that way there. Those are some of the facts. We're going to talk about some conclusions, but first we're going to talk about Sorare. Sorare is, thanks for sponsoring us, has been fantastic so far. Have you ever dreamed of stepping into the shoes of a general manager? Welcome to Sorare MLB, a groundbreaking fantasy baseball game where you by collecting officially licensed digital player cards of your favorite MLB stars. These aren't just any cards. They're your ticket to compete for over $1 million in total cash rewards and other amazing prizes. Imagine winning VIP trips to the MLB All-Star Game in 2024 or getting your hands on signed merchandise from top players. Here's how it works. Use your card to set your lineup each game week. Real-world plays like hits, strikeouts, and homers will power your team's performance. Climb the leaderboards and snag weekly wins, from cash prizes to more cards and unforgettable experiences. But wait, there's more. Build an iconic collection of your favorite teams and players to unlock gameplay bonuses and exclusive rewards. The rarer the card, the higher your score, and the bigger your edge in competitions. And when you're ready to trade, the Sorare Marketplace offers a vibrant community of managers. Engage in live auctions, make instant buys, or trade cards peer-to-peer. Starting is absolutely free. Draft your first team of common cards today and feel the thrill of competition as you climb the ranks to baseball mastery. What are you waiting for? Join Sorare MLB today. Transform your passion for baseball into a quest for glory and get rewarded for your baseball savvy. Sign up today with the link in the description and get 50% off your first pro cards up to $50. It's your passion rewarded. Big thanks to Sorare for their sponsorship. I'm here with Fred Zinkie, and we're talking about the overall pitching environment. And I wanted to, ask a few conclusions. And the big one, the obvious one, is where are we drafting starting pitching too soon in this landscape? And I focus on starting pitching, not pitching overall, because I think there's a difference between drafting an early closer and an early starter.
Agreed. I think before we conclude that, I think one thing we should share with everyone is some of the data on the hitters, because you got to be able to compare.
Okay, I thought I was going to do that separately, but we'll go ahead and do the hitters first. Okay,
yeah,
fine.
Let's do the hitters first, maybe, and then we can conclude.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So first one. Go ahead.
You're gonna nail me on selective endpoints on this, but heading into the week, 10 of the top 13 hitters and homers were drafted in the top 100. So most of your top power sources. You're going to say, Fred, why'd you stop at 13? I can't remember if it was just because it was a nice round number, like a dozen homers or something like that. But anyways, 10 of the top 13 in homers. And then looking at the other counting stats, 10 of the top 12 who have 40 runs scored were top 100 picks, and 9 of the 15 with 40 RBIs. So I set a round number, 40 runs, 40 RBIs, 10 of 12 in runs, 9 of 15 in RBIs. So most of them were top 100 picks. Batting average wasn't quite as high of a correlation. 5 of the 11 players who went into the week with a 300 average. But about half, like still a lot better than ERA, still a lot better than WHIP, were drafted in the top 100. So in hitting, if you want the league leaders, if you want some of the league leaders, like you had to find most of them in your top 100 picks. There were like only 3 of the league leaders in homers, only 2 in our runs scored, like were drafted outside the top 100. So if you want to have those counting stats and you want to have 1 or 2 of those league leaders helping your totals, you had to get them in the top 100 picks.
Yeah. Isn't this always true?
Yes. I think this is a usual. Absolutely. I think it's a usual correlation. First of all, you need opportunity. So hitters picked in the top 100 are play every day. They have high spots in their respective lineups. And obviously they're also considered to be talented. So it's not just about talent. Like you do need some opportunity there. So they're projected to be everyday players with good spots in typically even in good lineups. We don't see a lot of players from bad lineups picked in the top 100. So it makes total sense that even though some hitters in the top 100 are obviously the Bo Bichette's, like have been very disappointing, but like the ones who have succeeded, they were in the top 100 group as well. And you're right. I think that this is how it usually goes. It's just, I think the correlation for pitchers is lower this year from like high end pitching drafted to high end pitching production. The hitters is I think what it usually is.
I think you probably need to go deeper than 13 to 15. I think you probably need to go like 30 or so, but I think the point remains. I think you'll find a similar correlation. And maybe a little, the lower you go, obviously it's going to be a little bit more watered down. But I think the real point here is if you draft a high hitter and they bust, it hurts so bad. I lost Acuna. I drafted Lindor and Alonso. Shockingly, I'm tied for 8th place in my league. Go figure. I'm not getting the production I paid for. At Tout Wars, AL Tout Wars, I spent $200 of my budget on hitting, and it still stinks. It seems like a scouting year to me, but like Evan Carter out for a month, come on down, and he was terrible before that. But it really hurts when that early pick bust. Austin Riley, if you have Austin Riley right now, you're hurting. There's no way around it because the players around him that were drafted are producing. How many times do I have to lament Lindor versus Gunnar Henderson? All the time, because it's a devastating choice. It's crushing me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel your pain with Corbin Carroll so much in some leagues. Like he's
labor.
It's like I'm basically playing with no first round pick, right? Which is what Acuna now and Strider owners are doing. But I did the top 100 picks with the pitchers and the hitters. But if I wanted to spin all this differently, I could say that you needed to use a pick in the top 30 or 40 on the hitters to get the leaders. Like if you listen to the leaders, let's say home runs, Judge, Henderson, Tucker. There's 1, 2, 3, all picked in the first, 2.5 rounds. Then there's Ozuna, but then Soto, Jose Ramirez, but then and then there's Josh Naylor, but then Bryce Harper, Ohtani. So there's so many so many of those players, like forget top 100, they're top 30, top 40 picks. Other than
Yeah.
Henderson, maybe got just outside the top 30 in some drafts. Everyone else in there is picked in the top 20. So yeah, you needed to hit on a hitter if you want to have like an elite power hitter. You had to hit on him early. Like some of the other guys in the leaders, like Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia, Jordan Alvarez. These are all most of the next names on the list as I go down it. So again, all players picked in the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, and
Maybe 4.
both Seager and Alvarez have picked it up lately.
Yep.
And as Uncle Ted points out, Lindor's heating up now. Bregman's heating up now, although he's not in that range in terms of draft capital. But they killed you for a month and a half. Now they're heating up, so at least you got that going for you. And it's a long enough season. You got to remember, we're a third of the way into the season. I've remembered Derek Jeter hitting 190 going into June 1st. It happens sometimes. But point is, and it's so crushing when your hitters aren't hitting. You're hoping that they turn it around. All these Braves hitters, for that matter, have pretty much, except for Marcell Ozuna, have hurt you pretty much. Michael Harris has hurt you. Riley has hurt you. Albies is kind of hurting you.
Yep.
Matt Olson kind of hurting you, although he's been better lately too.
Yep. Seeing so many of those early round picks, it does make me think that, and you and I started hitter in a lot of leagues. So if you used one of those first couple of picks on a pitcher, not that it necessarily worked out badly. Like if one of them was Zach Wheeler or Corbin Burns, they're having good seasons. But as far as getting one of those hitters, if they all disappeared in the first 2 rounds, if you only take one hitter in the first 2 rounds, you better nail it. Because you got one shot at coming out with one of these guys who's among the league leaders. If you took 2 hitters in the first 2 rounds, at least you had 2 shots to nail it. If you only took one, you got 1 shot. And if you started, I thought back, DVR took pocket aces. I remember you talking to him after our labor draft. He did the Strider Burns thing, which I thought was great. And then it didn't work out with Strider. He's near the bottom of the standings. So am I. So I'm not throwing stones, but like, he's near the bottom. That's my team where everything's going.
We're all hanging out there together. Me, you, and him. We'll throw Piano and Zach Steinhorn in our personal hell too.
Like I said,
the 5 of us have been pretty consistently down there.
Yeah, that's my one league where that's really going poorly this year. Not they all aren't, but that one is. But DVR, not only you talk about opportunity cost, which we talk about more maybe in fantasy football than baseball, but to get those aces, he passed up all of the league leaders in home runs. Like now that we're at least so far, like we're looking at, they were all gone before DVR took. Probably, I'd have to go back and look at the draft board, but they're probably all gone before DVR took a hitter. So there's actually not a possibility, I guess, unless you got lucky and got Ozuna, or unless you got kind of lucky and got Josh Naylor. But other than that, like you weren't getting one of the leaders because they were all gone. So
Adolis Garcia, maybe.
He would have been there if you want to go down to that point. Yep, on the list, he's tied for 11th. Yep, for sure.
Yep. But that's the point is though. I mean, you got one of them then. Great.
Right.
My team lead in homers in that league is 11. By the way, I've got 2 guys at 11. One of them's Joe Adell, who I didn't get all of his homers, obviously. And I got nothing else to go with it, too. Actually, that's not true. He has 8 stolen bases. But, point is, I mean, if that's one of my leaders in power, then I've got problems. And I have problems. Who knew? But, it's been painful kind of witnessing some of that there when you have some busts like that. So the conclusions are, but the point is you can get some busts with the hitting side of things, but it's tough. It's really tough to try to get some of that production, especially non-stolen base production. I think stolen base production you could have gotten a little bit later, but the counting stats and the power, I mean, it's really hard to find.
Right. When offense is down across baseball, like again, supply and demand, when offense is down, when there's you and I, before we went on the air, we're talking about the Blue Jays and how bad they've hit and how frustrating they are. But then you also look at the hitting standings and you're like, oh, there's a whole bunch of other teams kind of down there with them. Like they could have a good week and all of a sudden be kind of out of the bottom 10 in a bunch of hitting categories. That's not going to happen, but it could. They're not far off because there's a bunch of teams that aren't hitting well. So in that supply and demand landscape, when there's people getting the Seth Lugos in rounds 25, the Tanner Houks, the Ranger Suarez, like when this is happening, but you aren't finding elite hitters in those rounds, should we have been drafting, or in future, it's so hard because the landscape always changes, but should we have been drafting more early hitters and then maybe taking more shots on starters in the middle and late rounds, because and then you hope that you've got a couple of the Seth Lugo types, couple of the Tanner Howe types on your roster.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not saying you don't take any pitchers early. Like I'm not really saying that, um,
But maybe 7 out of
maybe
10.
less.
Maybe,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
some
7 out of 10 are
8
your
out of
first
10
hitter.
even maybe.
Or maybe in your first 8 rounds or something, it's 6 hitters and a closer and a starter or something like that. And then you start loading up on starters after that. I put in our notes like this, everyone can pitch landscape, which isn't totally true that everyone can pitch, but we're just seeing so many guys who are out there, especially if you're in a 12-team league. We probably don't talk about that difference enough, but if you're in a 12-team league, there's just a lot of pitchers still floating around on and off waivers, with the ERAs, 3.5 and decent whips and things like that. Ryan Weathers, a lot of people have been talking about lately. He was on waivers in a lot of leagues recently.
Yeah.
Not that long ago. You could pick
Jake
up Ryan,
Irvin. I picked up this week. You mentioned, you mentioned a couple others too. You mentioned Kyle Gibson was available. Certainly in 12s, Kyle Gibson was definitely available in a lot of places there.
Right.
Before we talk more overall conclusions, take care of a little bit more business. Prize Picks. It's the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. It's really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. You do it with Thursday night's Celtics Mavs game. You can do it with tonight's baseball slate. You can use RotoWire's picks tool to do well on Prize Picks as well. RotoWire.com/picks to do that. But again, with Prize Picks, quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Big thanks to Prize Picks for sponsoring our podcast. As always, I'm here with Fred Zinkie, talking about the overall pitching environment. One other general conclusion. I thought this was really interesting, Fred. A general observation of the 22 pitchers qualified with an ERA under 3, 15 have fewer strikeouts than innings. In this season of low BABIP and high home run rate, is it getting whiffs less important than run prevention? It might be. And I think that there's a corollary to this is perhaps these pitchers throw with less velocity and thus are less likely to get hurt.
That's certainly possible too. So it's something that there's something that I noticed when I was reviewing the pitchers, and by the way, all of these pitchers that we're talking about, these surprising pitchers, they're not all flukes. Like we talked about Bailey Falter and how he's probably a bit of a fluke. Tyler Anderson, same thing. Some of these pitchers like Jake Irvin, like they have xERAs and FIPS and everything that match their ERA. Like they're not all flukes. These guys are actually succeeding on their own merit. So anyways, okay, so I thought about this on complete extremes. In theory, let's say that 99% of batted balls resulted in an out. Let's just say we lived in a world where 99% of batted balls resulted in an out. There would be basically no point to getting strikeouts. Like you'd be like, just let everybody put the ball in play. There's only a 1% chance that it's going to fall for a hit. And let's say that 99% of batted balls landed for hits. Well, then strikeouts would become the only thing that really mattered in pitching, because you'd be like, well, if they put their bat on the ball, they're getting a hit. So if you strike batters out, you're good. And if you can't strike batters out, you're just toast because everything they hit. So we're in the middle, not even in the middle. We're, where baseball is more towards the low BABIP side. But the BABIP across the league this year is down. And the home run to fly ball rate is down. So if the BABIP is down, then it stands to reason that you can get away more with having more balls put in play without it resulting in runs. Because again, there's a better chance, just like my 99% scenario illustrates, but this on a smaller scale. So you're a little more likely this year than in some other years to get away with this. Now, you would not, we pre-shift BABIPs were also low, but something I thought about when I was looking at strikeout rates is maybe some of these pitchers are succeeding because teams have been able to work the BABIP down. Now, is that because they're shifting smarter this year? I think that's quite possible. Like a year now, extra experience with the shift rules. They're shifting as smart as they can within the new rules. They're getting better at that every year. Coaching, does that in every sport. And is there anything different with the ball? Things like that. Who knows? We've been through this, Jeff, so many times. We'll find out. We'll find out about the baseball next winter or something like that. Someone will tell us if the baseball wasn't flying as hard and things like that.
And will it remain the same all year for that matter too? Initial research showed that for the amount of exit velocity matched with matched with even the angle, the launch angle, the ball was traveling not as far. The results weren't, results on line drives on hard hit balls was worse, both in terms of distance and also in just terms of just results, power stats, batting average, things of that nature. I think it could change as it heats up. I mean, they're going to say, well, it heated up, and they'll switch the balls and they'll blame it on the weather. That's the sort of thing baseball would do. Because they don't want to cop to anything there. Might be a storage issue. Every team might have better humidors. The humidors might be set differently. There's all sorts of different ways this could go. And that's the thing that's so frustrating is we just want to know what the environment is. And then so we can adapt to it. Of course, baseball doesn't have that interest. They don't have that vested interest. They're just going to do what they're going to do. Maybe they tell the teams, maybe they don't. Again, they have their own agenda. Maybe it's they want to have fewer homers in the game because they're getting hurt at arbitration. Who knows? I don't know. They could have various agenda, and that's the thing we'll never really quite know.
For sure. And to be clear, the strikeout leaders have good ratios, but they're not the only, like the non-strikeout leaders. Like a lot of these pitchers have already have 10, 12 fewer strikeouts in innings. Seth Lugo being one of them. Marcus Stroman's up in the ERA leaders. Jose Barrios is way below a strikeout per inning is up there. Gavin Stone is another one. Like there's so many of these pitchers who Reese Olson is doing great. He's only got 52 strikeouts in 61 and 2/3 innings. You didn't see this as much. Tyler Anderson's another one. Like you didn't see this as much where we had pitchers who just aren't who have a K per 9 of below 8.
Right.
But yet their whip is low and their ERA is low. But it makes some sense if the BABIP's down a bit, that they're getting away with giving up contact.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and we'll see where it goes. We'll just
will
see
that last?
The baseball, the weather, all these things. But so far, it's almost like you needed early round pitchers for the strikeouts, but maybe you could get the strikeouts back in volume and being aggressive with 2-star pitchers if we're more of a landscape where you can stream. Because your ERA leaders were not early round picks, your whip leaders were not early round picks. We didn't really get into this, but because it's not really that important, but your wins leaders were not early round picks. And again, so maybe also when we're evaluating pitchers, we should be a little more forgiving next winter if we're like, oh, his strikeout rate's not very good. He probably won't be very good. Well, we got a lot of guys, at least so far this year, who have a K per 9 rate that's not very good, but they're doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's right.
Max Fried, there's another one. Pitching great.
Max Fried's pitched well before, though. I mean, I think there's a difference there.
Yep.
I mean, Max Fried's kind of at a level.
Yep.
So I'm not really putting him in that bucket, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just there are more Max Frieds.
Yeah,
that's it.
Right.
He was a bit of an anomaly. I felt like when we would pick aces, they'd all be like 200 strikeout guys, and they'd have Max Fried at like 100, projected at like 160, and you'd be like,
wow. He and Framber were hanging out together.
Yeah, exactly.
Framber is not working out that way. I know because I have it on that same thing there.
For sure. And there are guys like Luis Hill, like Screwball, who are striking out a lot of batters and having great success. So it's not everybody, but it's not a requirement this year. So far, and I think it's the low BABIP, the low home run rate. Like it's not a requirement this year to have a high strikeout rate to have low ratios. So far,
I agree. So we'll see if that works going forward.
It's early in the year, and it's all kind of like you can't conclude. Like we're trying to conclude just past the third way through the season. It's more like at this point of the year, I feel like it's food for thought and stuff to monitor now. Like this would be a great podcast to redo this late in September.
I agree.
Like with
maybe even 2 months from now. Do it August 1st, and then we'll do it again at the end of the season.
Near the end of the season, and
third and a third. I like that.
And then that guides your process maybe for next off season for starting to think about drafts and rankings and things like that. Is based on what was the smart strategy this year,
right?
Because unless you can accurately project what changes there'll be in baseball next year, which we've been through this so many times, like you can't. Baseballs and all these things, like the baseball and everything, they change things and we don't know about it till after the fact. So
exactly,
you have to kind of assume that next year will be mostly like the past year.
Let's the follow-up question is, what's the action item here? Are you trading effective pitchers to try to boost up your hitting, and are you having any success? Are people actually accepting these offers? I made an offer of Luis Hill for Randy Arozarena, who is not a
Not
successful
well.
hitter right now.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I made it to the wrong person because he doesn't need strikeouts. And this is AL Tout Wars. I offered Mike Podhorzer that. I read the wrong line thinking he needed strikeouts. He doesn't need strikeouts. He wants more bats too. Everybody wants more bats.
Everyone wants bats.
Fred, I spent $200 in my AL Tout Wars team on hitting, and I need hitting. I'm getting crushed in the hitting categories. Now, some of this is, who I took. I took Evan Carter. I took Jackson Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on me. I spent some money on those guys. But point is, I don't have. I spent, basically almost 80% on hitting, and it wasn't enough.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Well, because and this is, and I feel your pain because I have this in some of these where you just ended up with the wrong guys, and then because of that, it wasn't enough. It's the double-edged sword. You have bad hitting, and you spent so much on hitting that you probably also don't have great pitching. Although I guess this year you might have been able to scrape it together.
Yeah.
The Arozarena thing's interesting. It makes sense that Mike, if he didn't want strikeouts, especially in an AL only, he wouldn't do the deal because you may not be able to deal from it. But Arozarena has been pretty awful. Like he's hitting 162.
Yeah, I thought that was the guy I could get. Maybe
you're talking about Luis Gil is among the leaders in ERA, WHIP, strikeouts. Like he plays on one of the best teams in baseball. Like that, like you would think you could get a good hitter for him, but you're right. When I was trying to trade Corbin Carroll in our labor league, the one thing I said is I'm not taking pitching for him because I have plenty of pitchers. But then everybody I talked to was like, well, I could give you a pitcher for him. And I was like, no, I have lots of pitchers just like you. Now, there are people who are at the bottom of the pitching standings. There has to be. But even the people at the bottom of the pitching standings, I think some of them feel like I have lots of pitchers. They just have to get it. Maybe I've got a Gosman or someone like that who's been struggling. Like they just have to figure it out. But I have enough. I have a lot of teams, and I play 15-team leagues only. I have a lot of teams that have good pitchers on the bench every week. Like every week I've got Zach Lytle, Javier Assad, like guys who are, maybe they've just got one start that week and I can't get them in my lineup. But by the time you put in 2 or 3 closers, a couple 2-start pitchers, your aces, like I feel like in all my leagues, when I do my waiver bids at the end of the week, I'm like, I don't need starters. Like I'll take one if there's someone really interesting out there to me, but I don't really need starters. I just start combing through trying to find any hitter I can that I think is going to have a good week.
Yep.
Then I don't find any. Or you know what I mean? Or I'm going out on a limb with who I'm grabbing Trevor Larnach or someone like that, just trying to get someone for the week. I've started keeping more hitters on my bench in some NFBC leagues so I could maybe at least stream for volume.
Yeah. By the way, just to clarify, I saw how much people need in terms of power. Ted, you're a little off on how many homers a week you need. And to get the 80th percentile in home runs, need about 12. You need about 305 homers for the season. That was the case last year. It's probably less this year.
It should be less this year.
Yeah. So 26-week season, you need about 12 homers a week. That's about what you need to hit the 80th percentile there. In a 12-team league, it's a little bit more, but we're talking maybe 13 a week. Just to clarify, it's still a lot.
Close to 2 a day.
And I'm not getting that, but yeah. So, but that's the benchmark you're looking at. In the idea, if you want to hit 80th percentile in all your categories, that will win you your league.
Mm-hmm. So I think on the trading market, like if you can make a deal where you can, like if your pitching is going great and you have Zach Wheeler and you can trade him for one of these stud hitters, I think it's hard to do it. I think you're going to contact other owners and they're going to be like, same as your Luis Gil. I bet the response you got from Mike was like, hey, it's like a really good offer, but I don't need pitching. Like he's not saying the offer is foolish or lopsided. Like if you go around and offer Zach Wheeler for Juan Soto or something, like the way Wheeler's pitched this year, it's actually not a bad offer. Like Wheeler's pitched great. Or if you offer him out for Jose Ramirez or something like that. But I think the other owner is going to say, you know what? I just can't give up Ramirez. Like I've already got 3 guys in my lineup who can't hit. Like I can't just take another blank spot. Like I just give up Ramirez and now I have.
And you can't trade for Jose Ramirez because he's at the peak of his powers. You need to hit go get on somebody that's flipping a little bit.
You're right. So maybe you got to go out on a limb and say, I'm going to draft but this would be hard, but I'm going to trade my ace, my Zach Wheeler type for Vladimir Guerrero. And I'm going to hope that Vladimir Guerrero, he's been hitting for average lately, not so much power. He did homer last night, but you're like, okay, I can't do my superstar pitcher for a hitter who's on a roll. I'll take a hitter who's not on a roll but is talented. I'll trade for
using RotoWire's earned auction values, auction dollar values. Luis Gil is worth $28 so far this year. Also worth 28 is Jordan Westburg. Would you do that trade straight up?
So my gut reaction is I'd rather have Luis Gil, but this is coming off years of
right?
years of just being like you got to get pitching, you got to get pitching. Um, I wouldn't automatically do it. I guess I'd be like Mike was and look at my team needs and see what I have on my bench. This would be the hard part. Like if I was going to take Heel, but I was like, you know what? I'm already sitting guys like Zach Lytle in weeks because I don't have room in my lineup. So I'm just going to keep sitting him. And then if I get rid of Jordan Westberg, I don't have an infielder to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they have to be almost maybe like 2 for 2s. Like,
right.
You're like, hey, you give me Westberg and Lytle, I'll give you Heel, and I'll give you, I don't know, Zach Neto, something like that. Like someone who's maybe playable but not that good. I don't know. I'd have to.
My point is, I think you're going to have to take like a $10 loss
It might
to get that. Like,
yeah.
I think you would have to say, okay, all right, Pete Alonso for Luis Heel. Pete Alonso's been worth 18 in a 15-team mixed environment. Luis Heel's been worth 28. You're not going to get Pete Alonso. Actually,
no, he says
I don't
no
think that's even
time.
realistic. I got to think of a better option. But I'm just trying to think. That's the range, though. I mean, that's sort of production range. Maybe you offer up Luis Heel for Nolan Gorman. Does the Gorman owner take that? Assuming that categories fit and you can make the rosters fit.
Like, he'd have to, wouldn't he? Like, it's Nolan Gorman. I know he's on a heater right now, but like I have him in some 15-team leagues. And he was on my bench at times earlier in the year because he was hitting like 200. Like, I know he's on a roll, but you would have to take that, wouldn't you? I guess you don't have to.
Yeah. He's got 13. Yeah.
I mean, how about Corbin Carroll? How about you just go full extremes? I'll give you Luis Heel, and then you give me Corbin Carroll. He totally stinks, but I'll put him in my lineup and just cross my fingers because at least there's massive upside there.
I might.
And at least the Corbin Carroll owner might be like, whatever, at least Luis Heel's playing great.
I got something for him before we find out he's going to have shoulder surgery.
Or
something like that. Yeah.
Or at least the Carroll owner could be like, whatever, I'll actually replace him with Trevor Larnach. I don't even really lose anything.
Yeah. I did pick up Trevor Larnach in a couple of
pretty comparable players. So I'll replace him with Blake Perkins, Nick Gordon. Like, all these guys have as many homers and steals and everything else, batting average as Carroll. So they're like, well, I don't really lose anything and I get a really good pitcher. But yeah, like you said, I think you're going to have to take a loss. And if you knew going into the season that was the case, then really, I guess in all of your trading leagues, you should have loaded up on hitting because now you can trade from an advantage right now.
Yep. One other overall conclusion that you asked about in the outline here, and I thought this was an interesting question. You believe that the pitcher injury crisis was overblown in April. Do you believe that to be the case now? Do you think this kind of helps conclude that a little bit too?
Yeah, I think anecdotally, like I haven't run numbers on it. I'm sure people, Saris or some people like that who do a better job with pitchers much better than I do. They'll run numbers on it. But the sky was falling when we recorded this podcast a week or two into the season. But we talked at the time about how that happens every year.
Yep.
It's cool
and it's weighted early too.
Yeah,
especially arm injuries.
Yeah, this is the start of the spring training and the start of the season. Those are really the two times, especially the start of the season. And all these pitchers go out, and some are out for a while, and some are out for the season, and everything else. I haven't had many pitcher injuries on my teams in the last few weeks. Like, I don't know about you. Like, I know Darvish just went out. Musgrove went out. I don't know if that really hurts you because you shouldn't have been using him probably anyways. I lost Dean
Jordan Romano.
Hurt
me badly. Cut me deep, Fred.
Yeah.
Because he already stunk too, and we knew this. We knew this was kind of coming because he started the year on the IL. I mean, there are some that have happened, but you're right. For the most part, they've certainly slowed down.
Like, there's always going to be injuries. So
yeah.
But if we're talking about a significant pitcher every week or a couple significant pitchers a week, and they're only out for a month, I think that's just life. Like, there's hitters going out every week too. Like, that's just life. Like, we haven't seen the oh my gosh, this week we lost 3 more guys who are top 3 starters for the season or for months. Like, it's really calmed down to the point where that's not a reason to avoid pitchers in the early rounds, especially if you're drafting close to the season. I could see it being a reason for our labor draft or people who draft really early, because then you have to hit the spring training problem and the opening day problem.
Right.
But if you're just going to deal with the opening day problem, I think you just do what you want to do for smart strategy and then cross your fingers.
Yeah.
On your pitcher injuries. The Spencer Strider thing just sucks, but it's just him. These other guys who went after him, like Garrett Cole, if you drafted early, but if you drafted late, you didn't deal with that. Like, the pitchers who went after him, Nola, Castillo, Kirby, these guys are all fine. They're all healthy.
I'm looking at the list. And many of them are pitching okay. Kirby's kind of struggled. Pablo Lopez has kind of struggled. Glass now stayed healthy. Skubal stayed healthy. Now Kevin Gossman,
not good. He's been healthy enough. Like, he's made 12 starts.
Diaz has been an utter disaster, by the way. There goes your theory. It's just starters, but
for sure. Yeah. Oh,
no,
the
one player does not dispute.
Sure.
One player does not discount an entire theory, though, either. Gallon got hurt, but it wasn't an arm injury, and it just happened.
And he'll be back.
Yeah, he'll be. Yeah, and he wasn't bad. Yeah. Yamamoto has been worth it, by the way. If you took the discount after after that first start, well, you're probably doing pretty well as far as that goes. You probably did fine. Yeah, there's not too many devastating arm injuries up at the top. Bobby Miller was a bad one, but now we're looking at an average pick in the 4th round there.
Yeah, for sure. And that was aggressive on Bobby Miller, I felt like, during draft season. Jesus Luzardo, if you want to go a little further, has had a rough start to the season. Mm-hmm. But then going all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, like, the problem with drafting the early starters isn't actually that the early starters have performed poorly. It's that so many late round starters have performed just as well or better.
Yeah.
So it's not that your Luis Castillo was a bad pick in a vacuum. It's that Tanner Houck has been better. It's that Ranger Suarez has been better. Like, if you said at the start of the year, hey, Luis Castillo, 13 starts in, I'm going to have a 2.99 ERA and a 1.15 WHIP, you'd be like, perfect. That's great. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Except there's just so many Luis Heels out there who have been doing this exact same thing. So,
that second round, though, I mean, there's a lot of bogeys. That's the funny thing. Austin Riley was picked 21, one pick for Castillo in the main event. Are you happy with Austin Riley? Probably not. Rafael Devers, okay, you're probably fine with him, but it was miserable for about 3 or 4 weeks into the season. Ozzy Albies hasn't quite delivered. He's been hurt. Michael Harris has been a disappointment. Lindor has been a disappointment. Alonso's been you got the power numbers, kind of, but not even really. Yeah. I mean, Vlad Guerrero's been a massive disappointment. CJ Abrams burst out, but he's actually struggled a little bit more lately. Gunnar Henderson. Okay. Gunnar Henderson's
been okay.
Yeah, we'll take him. Corey Seager was a massive disappointment for a month, and now he's been on fire. So.
Yeah. Simeon's been fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Point is, though, Bo Bichette, another disaster. Luis Robert, another disaster. There's bogeys everywhere. The second to third round has just been the land of disappointment.
The second round, a lot of the bogeys are the Braves. Like, if you take out the Braves, like the second round hitters, if you take out the Braves, are actually not too bad. Like guys like Devers and Harper and De La Cruz, like those guys from a fantasy perspective have been good. So a lot of the second round is and was the Braves, and that's its own discussion about whether we just bought high on an offense that just couldn't repeat, because you just don't repeat blowing away the competition.
Exactly.
Like, you could, but it's unlikely.
Indeed.
So we should have projected maybe more regression across the board for Braves. That's like I say, a separate discussion. But you're right. The rate of hitting on pitchers in the second and third round is just as higher than the hitters. The problem is that there's all these late round pitchers who are doing just as well. So maybe it was still worth taking a chance, and maybe you get stuck with Austin Riley, but maybe you get Bryce, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're the guy who got Bryce Harper.
Almost sounds like we need to do a better job of getting the right hitters too.
That's getting the right hitters. So maybe the discussion, the working conclusion is get hitters, but do a better job getting the right hitters.
I mean, it's possible you started Aaron Judge, Jose Ramirez, and that's the lotto right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were 13 and 15 respectively in ADP.
Or Aaron Judge and Bryce Harper. That would have been amazing.
We take that. Judges will allow that. They'd allow even a sprinkling of Jordan Alvarez, even though he hasn't been at that level. But Jose Ramirez at 15 is the nuts. I mean, getting him there, getting Judge at 13, getting those two together. Oh my goodness.
The back end actually this year so far has been, like, Trey Turner's hurt. That hasn't been good. But if I look from pick 10 on, your first rounders, Soto, amazing. Ohtani, amazing. Turner hurt. Judge, amazing. Alvarez, amazing. Well, really good. Getting good. Improving. He's up in the home run leaders again. Ramirez, amazing. And then even in the second round, Burns has been good. Wheeler's been good. Matt Olson not. Bryce Harper's been good. Ellie's been good. Like, those are your picks. The first two picks for the people who had the back end picks this year. You're really good odds that you came out of that with at least one, if not two studs, compared to the people at the front or middle who came away with Strider, Carroll, Julio, who hasn't been good. Right. So it wasn't quite as good. Freddie Freeman's been not as much power. Acuna has been a disaster. Yeah.
Jordan Earhart said he'd get Tucker and Witt. I don't understand how you get both of those.
That would have to be a keeper league, right?
Keeper or some weirdo. It must have been an auction league or
An
something.
auction league, yeah, it could be
Auction league. I could see that.
Yeah,
but,
auction or a keeper for sure.
Speaking of Kyle Tucker, news and notes.
Yeah, let's
fouled a ball off of his shin yesterday. X-rays are negative. It looked like it got on the quote unquote right part of the shin, but man, that looked like that hurt.
Yeah, it looked really bad at first. And it seems like he dodged a bullet as far as he's going to be okay. So yeah, if he was out for a while, like I'm sure a lot of the leading main event teams, league leading teams have Kyle Tucker, 19 homers, 10 steals. So up to 40 plus in RBIs and runs. So he's been everything Todd Zola told us he would be. Also, the batting average is only 266, but I'll take it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. He's been amazing. Todd Zola put him at 2. Kudos to Todd.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, he may not be number 2, but he's definitely right for being on the high side.
If you took him, yeah, well, his ADP was 6. So if you took him anywhere in that 2 to 6 range, it not only got you Kyle Tucker, it saved you the heartbreak of Strider, Julio, Carroll, right? So you avoided those players who were also going in that range.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hopefully you avoided Blake Snell because he's back on the IL.
Yeah, we talked last week about Snell and about maybe the takeaway on a few pitchers this year is be wary of pitchers who miss spring training and because they're waiting for contracts, because that was Snell this year. And now is this 3 IL stints already? I'm pretty sure.
Or at least, he was out to start
3.
the season. Yep.
Oh no, the one's paternity leave. Never mind. So there was I knew he was placed on something 3 times. So there was the IL stint and now a second IL stint. I'm not faulting him for the paternity leave, but in between all those things, he stinks. And would anyone in any league drop Blake Snell? I think no.
I think it's happened. I bet you it has happened.
Just because it's a groin. I was like,
since then, but
I'm not a Blake Snell guy at all. I almost never have him on a team. But I know the high end on Blake Snell is just so good. And it's a groin. It's not his arm. Like if he came back in a month, it was back around July 1st and started pitching better, I don't know. I would pick him up if someone dropped him.
96% rostered in the 12-team RotoWire Online Championship. So he has been dropped.
There you go.
And more, I think he was dropped in one of my leagues and then picked back up for a big chunk of change, which of course you're not surprised at, but still. In the main event, he's actually available in one league. He is 98% rostered in the main event. So someone just had enough.
Someone in the main event just couldn't take it anymore. He's dealt with a 406 BABIP this year, so there's been a lot of bad luck. I would absolutely, if I was in his league, I guess now I'm back to like maybe I wouldn't need pitching, so I wouldn't pay that much for it. But man, I would put in a bid. I would want to pick him up. I don't know if you find this, Jeff, but in my NFBC leagues, this is along my pitcher crisis, the pitcher injury crisis being overblown. I don't have that much red on my bench. I did in April. Like a ton of IL-15s and DTDs and everything. I don't have that much of it anymore. Like a lot of those guys either got hurt and they're gone or they're back now. Like a lot of my teams in the NFBC have, out of those 7 bench spots, have like 6 healthy players. Maybe
how many of those did you cut?
That's what I'm saying. Like maybe I cut a guy or 2, but I'm rolling with a full bench in a lot of those leagues right now, which means that I could grab a Blake Snell. I know people have been talking about Noelvi Marte, who I think has been picked up in a lot of leagues now. But like players who can't help, who you'd have to stash for a month. In a lot of my NFBC leagues, I could afford that player right now. I couldn't afford them in April. We had that rush of injuries at the start of the season. Right. I was operating some weeks with like a 3-man bench. But I'm not anymore. Yeah, it's really evened out.
Yeah. By the way, Luis Robert comes back. So that's one of those guys.
Yes.
Luis Robert, I had in some leagues, I had both Royce Lewis and Luis Robert. Fun times, 3rd and 4th round picks. In fact, it was my yogurt team. It had Strider in the 1st round, Robert in the 3rd, and Lewis in the 4th. How am I doing in that league? I mean,
right.
Good times.
But there's another one. There's like Lewis coming back too. So like your bench.
Yes, I got him back the same day. It's so fun.
Your bench had so much red on it at one point in time. Yes. You're waiting you got the 2 injured hitters. You're waiting to see what's going on with Strider. And now Strider's gone. The injured hitters are back. And now you might have room on your bench to stash someone if you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is true. But the second you do that, it almost feels like that's when you turn around and you get more injuries again.
For sure. Which is why maybe you don't want to fully, you don't want to pay triple digits for the Blake Snell, but you put in a competitive bid for him, or
Yep.
or Noel V Marte or something, because you may have to recut them before they get back.
Exactly. So, but I am putting Luis Robert active in all my leagues now, so I've got that going for me there.
It's exciting to put those guys back in.
One of the things I love about the NFBC format is when you're setting rosters, just search Robert, and poof, there they all are. Except unfortunately, I have Robert Gasser, who's also hurt right now, so it's confusing for the Roberts of the world there.
He got good news today, though, from his MRI or whatever.
Yeah.
So he got good news. So it looks like it's not going to be a big problem with him. I will mention on Robert, since we're talking about his time when he's coming back, the White Sox did say they're going to kind of give him regular rest.
Yep.
For a while. So then I was like, oh, I'm so excited. Luis Robert's back. Oh, wait, he's only going to play like 4 games a week, and they're the worst offense in the league.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's something, but he should be helpful, but maybe not what. If we were projecting him out for the rest of the year, I wouldn't have him nearly as high as I did during draft season now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to get Royce Lewis back. Still hasn't made a major league out this year, so we got that going for us. Yeah, but I got that. Other notes real quick. We'll blaze through some of these. Noel V Marte got a due date now. June 27th is when he's first eligible. Beginning a rehab assignment next week. He's already been down at the Reds rookie complex in Arizona. He'll start playing games in about a week. He gets to play minor league rehab assignment. So that's one thing. When you're suspended, you can still play minor league games.
Yeah, which should be great for him to hit the ground running in the majors. And I think he's an easy stash everywhere. The Reds also don't have the log jam that they had when we were back in draft season.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to put him into their everyday lineup. And I think they're going to do that. So, yeah, he's and we're talking about not being able to find hitting. Well, if you find, and he's not coming off, like he's not coming off an injury. So you don't have to worry about him being rushed back or not ready. Like, he's coming back in late June and he's ready to go. So I think he's the best or one of the best stashes you can have out there right now.
Exactly right. And it's just the problem was in the main event, I was trying to try to roster him because I saw he wasn't rostered. Oh wait, because we drafted so late, nobody drafted him. So he had to be drafted to be picked up now in stash. So
get ready to pay for him.
Yeah, that might be a big pay up there.
Absolutely.
Other notes about the Reds. They scored a lot of runs in course. Go figure. 13 runs yesterday. Tyler Stevenson hit an opposite field home run that was just a smash. Ellie had a hit. Everybody seemingly contributed there. It was fun for a day to be a Reds fan, but I'm not under any misconception that this is good offense yet.
You're just like me when the Jays were playing the White Sox. Just enjoy it while you have it.
Exactly right.
Come back to reality. Reds, I think, play the Cubs at the end of the week, so you'll come back to reality then.
Yep, back to life, back to reality there.
Yeah.
Brandon Marsh on the IL. He suffered that hamstring injury Sunday night. And David Dahl, remember him? Got called up and homered, of course, because Phillies do everything the Phillies touch turns to gold right now.
Yeah, it's always cool when guys like David Dahl, who were one-time like buzzy fantasy guys, come back and just make a reappearance. I know David Dahl he plays in the majors almost every year, just not very much. So he did play 4 games with the Padres last year. Like, he comes back like every year to remind you that he still exists. Just 30 years old. So I don't think you'll get anything out of him. Brandon Marsh, it looks like he's only going to be out for a short amount of time. So I think he's someone to hang on to. In this year of not good hitting, he's been okay. He didn't hit any home runs in May, but he did hit 250 and steal 5 bases and plays in a really good lineup. So I think he's someone. He hit 5 home runs in April. Like, it'll just up and down, but he's a power speed mix guy in one of the 5 best lineups in baseball. Depends how you want to measure them out. But
I'm having my pitchers avoid Philly like the plague right now.
Me too. So I think with a hamstring, like, I think he's worth a hold. It's supposed to be a pretty minor injury.
Indeed. So good news there.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to hit before we sign out?
I could mention Mark Vientos.
Yes.
Great game last night. He got on base 4 times and he homered, and he was like a really popular fab pickup on the weekend. I think he's really interesting. I did not get him in one league where I wanted to, but I put in a competitive bid. I have a league where I have my opposite of labor league. Like, I have a league where mostly everything's going right. Mm-hmm. And in that league, I picked up Vientos for like $2, like the week before, just needing like a bench bat and kind of being like, I wonder where this whole thing could go. So anyways, I think he's really interesting. He's their everyday third baseman. He hits. We'll see if he can keep it up. I mean, he's going to regress some. His BABIP's 366, but if he could hit 260 with power, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
And
I like
on that roster.
And I have Brett Beatty in labor, but I also like Vientos a lot. And I do prefer Vientos the rest of the way, but I think both need to play at the big league level, but it's not going to happen until the Mets start trading. And this is like, I think the Mets are like the linchpin to trade season. Alonso being the principal guy, but they have like a bunch of 30 somethings in their lineup, and they don't have a ton of young guys, but both Vientos and Beatty need to play. They need to I don't think they've found out yet about Beatty. I think the verdict is, I know he's been disappointing, but I think the verdict is still out on him a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's true. He and I feel like Beatty's regarded as more of a prospect, which I get, especially if you factor in like scouting them and defense and everything, like more than Vientos. But they're the same age, and Vientos in his career, 313 at bats, 15 home runs. Like, he has power. Like, over a full season, he's a 25 homer guy or something like that. It'll just be what the batting average is.
Yep.
So far this year, it's been good, but a lot of BABIP, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think the Mets would love to be able to get anything for Starling Marte. I think they'd like to get, I think Alonso they can get more for, but it's a first baseman, maybe not as much as they think, or maybe not as much as we think. I don't think Nimmo goes, only because of his contract, but they have, McNeil, who's going to trade for McNeil? But point is, they have all these 30 somethings occupying spots that Vientos and Beatty can play, and they're going to have to trade some of them at some point in time. They have to open things up for younger players.
For sure. I do think the Alonso, I'm interested to see what they get for him, because like you said, he's a first baseman. At the same time, there's got to be a lineup out there that he would just fit perfect in. Like, for example, I know Ryan O'Hearn's given the Orioles plenty of, he's been okay for the Orioles, but could you imagine if they just rented Pete Alonso for the rest of the season?
Yeah.
And put him in the middle of that lineup, which is so good already. And they have so many prospects that they could actually give up some prospects for him. I'm not talking about their best prospects for a rental,
Connor Norby, who just got the call, would be a perfect target.
Right.
I think they have to do a little bit more than that, but maybe not much more. They're not going to get Kobe Mayo for him. They're not going to get Jackson Holiday for him. Come on. So let's not,
they're not going to get ourselves. And they're not going to get those from other teams. The Orioles are so deep in prospects that, you take Alonso and put him in I know that's not a great park for home run hitting, but neither is Citi Field.
Right.
And Alonso's got amazing power. You just put him in the middle of that lineup. And if I took a few minutes, I could think of, I don't know if the team like the Royals pays big for a rental. But anyways, I think there'll be teams out there who are just it makes sense with hitting down this year. There's got to be some teams out there who are be in the playoff race and would say, man, what would one more slugger do for this lineup? Right? Yep. It would be like, we've pitched our way to the playoffs. We need a Pete Alonso. Every year they say that every team needs pitching, and it's true. But, the Brewers, for example, what would Pete Alonso do to change that lineup, which has actually been pretty effective this year?
Well, all I have to do is point to 2021. The Braves traded for 3 outfielders. Acuna got hurt. They added Adam Duvall, who was awesome. They added Jorge Soler. They added Eddie Rosario. They all had their moments at different times, and it worked out. I think you'll see some of that there. But Alonso could be in that sort of vein. It has to take we're not getting it. We don't have much at first base. The Yankees are getting nothing from Rizzo right now. Think about that.
Yep.
That would be a great fit.
Would the Mets do that? I feel like they would not. I feel like they just would not help the Yankees win the World Series.
If the Yankees have the best offer,
they should take it. You're right. They should take it.
It's myopic to think about, especially when he's a rental. He could sign with the Yankees in the offseason. They get nothing for it. Might as well trade him and get something for him.
You're right. You're totally right. So there's teams out there. I think they'll get not a massive haul, but they'll get something decent. And I'd like to see that happen sooner. I'd love to see Alonso in a good lineup or in a better park or both.
Indeed. Yeah. All right. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Good topic, Fred. Looking forward to next week. Tomorrow we got James Anderson. No podcast on Thursday. I'm traveling. Then we got two start starters on Friday with Clay and Todd. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you like this podcast, you like this stream, please hit that like. Please hit the subscribe button. If you really want our stuff, go to rotowire.com/pod. Get that free trial. Peek behind the paywall. We've been giving you this free trial for 20 years, and it works. No credit cards required. rotowire.com/pod. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great day. Take care.